Okay. Well, I think we're ready to begin getting all the logistics here. I appreciate all of these wonderful people here. I apologize, the library does not have more seats for us to sit on. Anyhow, we're going to start. I'd like to welcome you to the League of Women Voters and Record Searchlight Candidate Forum. I'd like to introduce, I'm Alice Bell. I should introduce myself. I'm the president of the League. And our moderator tonight is Susan Wilson. She's the first vice president of the League, the local league, and she just finished a 2-year term as national treasurer. 6 years. Oh, sorry. And we have quite a team here of people sorting the questions in the back, and we have information about the league in the back and registering propositions you might be interested in picking up, pros and cons. They don't take a position on them. They're just the who says what about them. And we appreciate the both candidates being here tonight to do this forum, and Susan will be explaining the format.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you, and thank you both to Heidi Hall and Doug LaMalfa for joining us tonight, and to all of you for joining us tonight. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of the Reading area and the Reading Record Searchlight, I'd like to welcome you to this candidates forum. We are filming the forum today, and it is, I think you can watch a live stream in the library. Do I have that right, Deborah? It's on your phone, anywhere you want it, you can watch it live, and then it will be available at later times, and I think there was a handout that described those times. Remember, the election is on the 4th of November. In Shasta County, we have a reputation for vote by mail. If you vote by mail, make sure that you get that ballot and do your voting. I want to remind you that the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization, that we encourage informed and active citizen participation. This looks like that. And that we influence public policy through education and advocacy. So let me describe our format for this evening. The order of speaking was determined by flipping a coin. I'm not very good at that. But Heidi will speak first, opening, and then we will rotate, and then Doug will speak first when we close. All the questions will be directed to the candidates by me. We aren't accepting questions from the audience. If you have a question, please jot it down on your 3x5 card. Wave it gaily in the air, and someone will come and get it from you and take it to the ladies in the back. So there's somebody waving already. We will, I think that the way that we're going to do it tonight is we're going to have 3 minutes for the opening comments, 1 minute per question, unless I get a real true signal from either of the candidates that it's a question that requires longer than a minute to answer. A minute kind of keeps you brief, but if there are some questions that could use a little more time, let me know. And then we'll have 2-minute closing. The timer is right here, and we have cards. We have a 1 minute, 1 minute is green, 30 seconds is yellow, and red is truly stop. So that's that. Please be sure to keep your questions of a general nature. I know that Mr. LaMalfa is the incumbent, and you might want to address specific questions to him, but what this is about is judging both of the candidates together at the same time. Please, no clapping for either of them. You know, we can move faster if you don't clap, and so if you could keep your clapping to a minimum until the very end when you can stand and scream and stomp and clap and do all those things, I would really appreciate it. Any questions from either of you? I think I've been in touch with both of you before this. So with that, Heidi, are you ready to start?
Ready, if this is on. It is on.
It is.
Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to thank the League of Women Voters and the Reading Searchlight for sponsoring another forum like they did in the primaries. I'm very excited to see so many people here, and I always welcome the opportunity to be out here talking about what I believe in and why I believe I would be the best representative for you here in this district. My name is Heidi Hall. I grew up in the Bay Area, spent my summers and weekends in Grass Valley, and moved up here 10 years ago with my 2 children. I'm the daughter of public school teachers. I came up through the public school system myself, and both of my children did as well. And I'm a great advocate of public education that is well funded. It's an investment we should be doing in our future, in this country, in our children, and you can count on me to be a public advocate that way. I'd be happy to stand. That's what I'm used to, actually. Thank you. Can you all see me, hear me better this way? Great. Okay. I also have a son who's a veteran. I'm also the daughter of a veteran. And my veteran son is now working in Tennessee. He's managing a fast foods franchise, working very hard and struggling to make it in this economy. Not very long ago, he was making minimum wage, which in Tennessee is $7.25. And even though he worked more than 40 hours a week, he was struggling to survive, and he was actually eligible for food stamps. Number one, our people who are working more than full-time need to be able to earn a living wage in this country. And number two, our veterans should be giving all the training and education they need when they come back from laying their lives on the line so that they can support their families. And I will be an advocate for veterans and for working people as well. I'm also a working mother, and I've had to deal with budgets both in my household and as a manager in the federal and state government, and fiscal responsibility is high on my list of priorities. As I've campaigned around this district for almost 2 years now, I have found that many of the issues that we have that I want to work on are ones that you have raised to me. We have forests that have been mismanaged for 30 years, and for 30 years we've seen no legislation that would help us come in and deal with that. We're in the middle of a drought. We've got water issues that we've had zero leadership on for all this time. We've now got an irrigation district that wants to sell their water rights and double their groundwater pumping, which will hurt their neighboring ranchers, and I don't advocate for that. We need to be more involved in the water issues of this entire state. I'm also certain to be the person who will help protect our Social Security and Medicare and work to keep students, make it possible for them to get a higher education without drowning in debt. I will be an active advocate in this region, working across party lines to deal with the rural issues that are specific to the North State, and that's why I'm running for Congress today. Thank you.
Thank you. No, please, no. Doug?
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate being here tonight. Thank you to the League for faithfully putting these forums together all these years. I've participated in many of them during my time as in a legislative life here. I'm here a lot in the district here in Northern California and here in Redding. I got the plane point miles to prove it. So it's been quite an experience this last almost 2 years in the U.S. House, and one that's been certainly a pleasure and honor for me to be able to do, and glad to do that on your behalf. Some of the things that we have been working on, will continue to work on. I'm trying to do something about California's drought via the legislative process. I'm carrying a bill called H.R. 4300 to build Sites Reservoir down the valley a ways here, which will enhance our water supply for the state. Now, anything we can do to enhance water supply is going to be a plus for us, especially as we battle to keep our water and our water rights here in the North State. The more we do to increase supply through all the means, whether it's building above ground surface storage, or we do more on desalination for all the coastal areas that live on the coast. I mean, there's a ready supply right there, as well as continuing with conservation and recycling. However, we can't rely totally on those because we have to have something to conserve or to recycle. So we've had that vision in the past of the Central Valley Project, State Water Project. It's key we continue to do that. Our energy costs are a main driver of how well our economy does. We've worked to send energy bills over to the Senate, but also do things that increase the supply of lower cost energy for Americans. Are you enjoying those $3.50, $4 at the pump prices? They could continue to go up with some of the legislation coming down the pike. I want to make it where it's more affordable for you and your family to do what you need to do in your jobs and just getting around, getting your kids to school, whatever it takes. because these things come directly out of your pocket. Cost of gas, cost of groceries, cost of your health care. Now, we need to do more things to make health care affordable, to lower costs, not just have the government somehow take over and run it and think it's going to do better. So there's many things that we need to address in Congress. Our international situation is really on the edge of disaster. We have to project strength as this country, as the United States around the world, as we have in the past, to be that beacon, to be that source of reason, the source of soundness around the world that they can look to and say, we have a friend there who's going to back us for standing for freedom, standing for liberty. So it's a big job, it's a big responsibility, but I'm up for it. That's why I'm asking for you to send me back for 2 years again to continue to do this effort. So thank you again for having the forum here tonight, for your participation in the civic process. A full room, it's great, and glad to have that interaction. So thank you so much. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. And Doug, you're going to get to answer the first question first. And the first question is, yes, 1 minute. What should government do regarding climate change, and how do you reconcile that with economic concerns in 1 minute?
When does it start? Government needs to allow the innovation that's going to do things better, cleaner, more efficiently. We have the best running automobiles and trucks that we ever have because of innovation that has come from microchips and smaller downsizing computers. You can put microchips in cars now that govern fuel injection systems and make our trucks run cleaner. That has made the quantum leaps in improvement in air quality and things of that nature. So if we allow the innovation, the high tech that California has had and we would like to still keep here, then we're going to keep coming up with solutions. The market drives that. People desire these things. What we shouldn't be doing is penalizing people that are trying to come up with the innovation, such as this vehicle mileage tax that's being floated here. You all are being good folks, using less fuel, driving smaller cars that are more efficient, and so what's the payoff for that? We're going to tax you more for every mile you drive because you're not paying enough at the pump anymore because you're using less gas. How does that work for anybody? So let's go in the direction of allowing more freedom and more opportunity, and that's what will help solve all these issues we have in environment, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question.
Thank you. The first thing we need to do is acknowledge that climate change exists and is caused by humans, and my opponent will not acknowledge that. Once we acknowledge that, we can stop arguing about the facts and start dealing with the solutions. This government must invest directly into better, cleaner, greener energy. We do have some of the most creative people in the world in the United States. They are wanting to move forward on green energy. It will also help us become less entangled in the Middle East, so we are less dependent on foreign oil if we do more to increase our green, clean energy. My opponent actually sponsored a bill that requires PG&E to spend more money to justify why they would bring green energy into the system. And that's going to be passed on to us as consumers. That's not consumer friendly, and it's not green energy friendly. So I'd like to ask you all to make sure you're aware of the votes that are being taken besides just what we're saying we believe in. Thank you.
Thank you, and you can stay standing because you get to answer this one first. If presented with a choice to cut benefits from Social Security for those under 55 or to remove the cap on Social Security wages, which would you choose and why?
I believe that we have one of the best Social Security systems we can have right now, but we need to stabilize it and make sure it will last long enough to cover folks in the future. The one thing we do not want to do is privatize it, and as you may know, that's one of the things on the table. So that would be the first thing I would make sure we do. I do think we need to look at raising the payroll cap because that would help to bring more money into the system without providing an onerous burden on any specific group of people. The Social Security system helps keep millions of older Americans alive, housed, and able to feed themselves. It's a system we should be proud of, and it's a system we should do whatever we need to destabilize.
Thank you. Doug, the same question? Sure. If presented with a choice to cut benefits from Social Security for those under 55 or to remove the cap on Social Security wages, which would you choose and why?
I think until we've addressed all the other aspects of Social Security for people that have not paid into the system receiving benefits, or talking about what do we need to be looking at on retirement age? What do we need to be looking at on eligibility with longer life expectancy? Is that an area we should be looking at? So I think we reformed the system before you sock somebody with more, paying more into it, because again, that's going to have a side effect. You have real people paying more. Cutting the benefits, that's not good for anybody either that are would be receiving it or expecting to. So if we're reforming Social Security in that the government has a whole big box full of IOUs that it owes because it borrows from Social Security to do other things. I mean, this is supposed to be a trust fund. Where is the trust in that when the federal government is taking that money that's supposed to be part of people's nest egg at least and doing other things with it, and then figuring out by the year 2035 or so it's not going to be solvent? That's really criminal in a sense. We need to address that aspect before taking more from people.
Okay, Doug, you get this question first. What are your feelings regarding the Affordable Care Act? Do you think we should keep most of it, make changes to it in some areas, or repeal the entire act?
I would have opposed it had I had a vote at the time. I would favor, well, look what the president did on it. When it came down to the crunch time in implementing the act, he, by executive order, decided to delay it a full year on large employers. We in Congress responded and said, you know, Mr. President, it's not working very well. We're going to affirm that, not by executive order, because that's not legal under the Constitution. You have to pass a bill to change a bill. We affirmed that decision. We also offer another bill delaying it for all other Americans, because what we were seeing at the time was broken websites, broken promises as far as it costing people $2,500 less. People are losing their coverage. They're paying even more than ever. Now, what was it supposed to try to address? The folks that are uninsured. We have ideas and plans to help the uninsured, but a way that's efficient without the government ruining it for everybody in order to help those that need it. And that's what we want to try and accomplish if we can have that debate and get that out. So there's solutions to it, but under the current plan of the ACA, it's not working very well for hardly anybody.
Heidi?
Well, I couldn't disagree more. We have an Affordable Care Act that has put 10 million more people onto health care systems, has reduced the cost of health care for 50% of the population, that would be all women, and has made sure that people with pre-existing conditions can now be covered. Let me remind you also that my opponent for most of his 2-year term has said that repealing the Affordable Care Act is his top priority, and in fact, Congress took over 52 votes to repeal it. They did not take votes to improve it or to fix any of the things he talked about needing to be fixed. They simply wanted to repeal it, and they have not put forward any kind of an alternative. So I would say there are problems with it. There are people falling through the cracks whose premiums have gone up too high, and we need to do something to fix that. There's a problem with the medical devices tax. We need to fix that as well. Congress could fix all of those things with a simple vote. Imagine if they'd taken 52 votes to improve and implement the Affordable Care Act rather than to repeal it. I think we'd be in pretty good shape by now.
Thank you. And you get to answer this question first. How would you strive to represent the variety of people in your district rather than those of your own political persuasion?
That's a really good question. I think I would say, you know, I believe that a representative needs to represent all of the constituents of the district, not the ones that vote for you only. And I've set that up in the way I've campaigned for the last 2 years. I have put myself out there, offered to speak to people from both sides of the aisle, from both political parties, from farm bureaus to business associations to environmental associations. I've been on radio, the radio stations both on the left and the right several times, and I'm very interested in hearing from my constituents, and I would respond to the needs of all of them. This is a moderately conservative district. There is a moderate middle here in this country, in this district, and in Congress. Those are the people I would be representing. Those are the issues I know we can work on and achieve results from, and that's how I would work in Congress, work across the aisle, and work with every constituent in this district.
Thank you. Doug?
Yes, we do represent everybody in the district. They may not all agree with you, but I have a friend that has a little saying that if you try to make everybody happy, you're going to make none of them happy all the time. So it's a deal where you stand for the principles that you mentioned, you talked about when you ran as a candidate, and you stand on those principles and the voters decide. Now that said, you try to work with everybody and make sure their issues are being addressed, but what it really comes down to is what's good for everybody as far as the economy, for jobs, for choices for their family, right? For what they would want to do in order to stay here in the North State, so their kids could be raised here and stay here and find jobs in the North State. So really, where the government interaction is, it should be what creates opportunity for people of this district as well as the whole country. I work across the aisle. I did for many years in the state legislature. I mean, when you're in the minority down there, you have to work across the aisle if you're going to get something done. We got some things done on forestry, plenty of other measures, and there's my time. Thank you.
Thank you. You can stay standing and hold on to that microphone. What is your position on the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act of 2013?
Oh, thank you. Okay. Now, that measure I voted twice in favor of that bill, the House version of the bill. The one that came out of the Senate I was concerned about because it had constitutional problems in that. Now, the first thing actually before you do anything, when you take public office, is you put up your right hand and put your hand on the Bible and swear to uphold the Constitution. So a measure that has constitutional problems in it not only violates that oath, but also puts the measure in peril as well. And so if there's not the protections in there, also it would take away from the whole thrust of the VA Violence Against Women Act, in that it was defunding the type of centers that they were getting help for. You know, the shelters, things like that. There was defunding that was happening in that bill, so I wasn't really comfortable with that idea either. What are we trying to do in the act? So it becomes a political football, but I think the right thing for making sure we do that is to pass a constitutional bill that will stand the muster. Thank you.
The Violence Against Women Act that my opponent voted against was a reauthorization of the excellent existing bill with several improvements to make sure that all women were covered. All credible women's organizations supported that bill. My opponent did not. The bill he supported stripped several classes of women out of that bill, including LGBT women, and the improvement that the original bill had in it would have helped Native American women be able to go to their own tribal courts rather than to have to go into our courts here. So the Violence Against Women Act that the majority of people supported, that women's organizations supported, and that I support, my opponent did not vote for. I want to make that clear. I support Violence Against Women's Act legislation that covers all women for all issues.
Thank you. And hold on to that microphone. Do you support the use of drones in the United States for commercial safety, i.e. flyover wildfires and flooded areas, and also for use by law enforcement? Why or why not?
So this is one of those tricky areas where we have new technology and the regulations haven't been developed yet, and there's clear cases where it would be very useful and helpful to us, and also cases where it could be an abuse of our civil rights. So what I would ask Congress to do, rather than not pass bills like they have the last 2 years, would be to come up with some legislation, go to the agencies that are dealing with this, and make sure that we have a good bill that would, first of all, protect our civil rights so that we are not being spied upon, unknown by drones, but also make it possible for the great commercial uses that I think there would be for drones. Could also help our economy up here, as there has been an interest in the use of commercial drones in this area.
Thank you. Doug?
Well, the use of drones by regulatory agencies, when we see the extent that regulatory agencies are going these days, the EPA, Army Corps of Engineers, NOAA, to where they're going, I really am very fearful of how far this authority could go into the invasion of our privacy. So amongst the legislation that the House passed is still sitting on Harry Reid's desk untouched includes limitation of the NSA for doing this kind of spying using this technology or others. So the use of drones could be a good thing in the private sector for very specific uses, such as surveying forest land, maybe looking for fires, all the types of things that a piece of aircraft technology could do. But I'm very, very concerned that in the hands of government that it will be used mostly to track and harass us, as it has happened so much with federal agencies such as the IRS, such as EPA and others, putting jobs, putting people out of business. Thank you.
Thank you. You again first. You again. Doug. What are your feelings on fracking? Does the production of the natural gas take precedence over the effects that production has on the environment?
Well, when there's little to no effects on the environment, hydraulic fracturing has really been a giant godsend for lowering the cost of energy in this country. Natural gas is so much more available now that other outside businesses from outside nations are looking at the U.S. because of the lower cost of natural gas, which helps all of us. Now, the hydraulic fracturing process hasn't really shown, other than through conjecture, that there's been an environmental problem. What we see is that even with the process they're using now, they're working on ways to improve it with using less water and using less of the materials they use in hydraulic fracturing. So I think we would be very remiss to throw that baby out with the bathwater, because it's a great technology that's just being improved on like all other technologies improve on if there's a free market for it.
Thank you.
Thank you. It'd be hard to explain how you could think there are no environmental side effects to fracking if you read the news, any of the mainstream news or TV shows. We have seen the incredible amount of devastation that's already starting to happen from a process that is not regulated, that has giant loopholes that no other industry has, for example, in the Halliburton loophole for the Clean Water Act. Fracking takes hundreds of thousands of gallons of water. It injects up to 600 different chemicals deep into the ground, cracking the shale, being exposed to groundwater aquifers, which some of us drink from, and it's being shown to cause earthquakes. What we're seeing now, people are starting to pay more attention to it because it is also causing home prices to drop where fracking is occurring. Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again, I'm always open to better domestic oil and gas production if we can do it in a way that's environmentally responsible, but we're not there with fracking.
Thank you. The next question for you. The Farm Bill costs billions of tax dollars each year for agricultural subsidies and for food stamps, which we now know as CalFresh in California. Do you think that money is effectively spent?
No, I don't. And one of the things I would call for in Congress would be an audit of the Farm Bill, which has never been audited, although the food stamp program within it has been audited multiple times. So just a quick history, that bill started back in Depression and it was created in order to keep farmers in business at the same time to provide people who were literally starving. It was an excellent idea. It has since morphed into an absolute handout to millionaire farmers across the country. Only 1% of the farmers are getting huge crop insurance subsidies. The rest of the farmers are not. And my opponent voted to increase crop insurance subsidies while suggesting that we should decrease SNAP funding for poor children. Now, we have 12% poverty rate in this district, and I would certainly not be voting to cut the SNAP funding, and I would certainly ask that we look at how and where we are offering farm subsidies. If they're the great thing he thinks it is, then why aren't we giving them to all farmers and ranchers? Maybe we better take a look at how they're being distributed and who's getting them, and reduce that $14 billion a year that's going to them.
Thank you. Doug? Sure. The Farm Bill costs billions of tax dollars each year for agricultural subsidies and for food stamps. I referred to them as CalFresh. Do you think that money is effectively spent?
With any program that's sponsored by the government, you can always find ways to more effectively spend to oversee, to audit, to reform them. So the Farm Bill, the Farm Program has been around for a long time. This is the first chance I have, as a member of Congress, have had an opportunity to vote on that. I voted to eliminate the direct payments. Farmers are now paying into an insurance program that only pays out when there's a catastrophic happening in the ag community. So we've taken a step in the right direction. On the SNAP program, or the food stamp program, it's 80% of the Farm Bill. The farm part of the Farm Bill is 20% of the Farm Bill. So that program has grown dramatically over recent years, but the area we focused on was the fraud within the Farm Bill, within the food stamp program. So we would always be looking for ways to improve any program to keep to its mission, to keep to helping the people that you had set out to help to begin with. So I had 3 affirmative votes supporting both aspects of that program, the food stamp portion as well as the farm part of the Farm Bill.
Thank you. And your next question is, how important is working across the aisle to you as the people's representative for all of District 1?
Extremely important in that if you want to be successful, if you want to get the things done for the people, you're not really looking at the partisan nonsense, you're looking at what's going to be results oriented. I can get criticized from both sides on that issue, but I try to just cut down the middle on that and get it done. Such, for example, the Sites Reservoir legislation I'm authoring, my main co-author on that happens to be from the other party, down that direction in Colusa County. So we're going to work together with people across the aisle, people on the other side of the building in the Senate. You know, so whether it's Senator Feinstein, we're going to work together on water, work together on forestry management, things that make sense. And I think that's what the American people expect. After the election's over with, get things done, get to the solutions, and stop the bickering. Now, the bickering will never stop because there's a lot of theater and drama on TV about it, but when you get down to actually getting things done, I can sit down with my colleagues and get along just fine on most things. You agree on some things, you disagree on others, and that's going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have to repeat the question for me this time.
How important is working across the aisle to you?
Okay, so I need to start out by saying the Site STEM project, which Doug LaMalfa referred to, will benefit a very small group of farmers in the very small part of this district. So while it's great that that's bipartisan, it's certainly not the kind of thing that we need in this district to help most of us. Now, there is a moderate middle that I like to talk about in Congress, Republicans and Democrats alike. I agree with most of the things they wanted to get done in this Congress, including things like immigration reform. However, there is a radical extremist group on the GOP side who have stopped legislation that would have a majority support from coming to the floor, or they put poison pills in it so that it will not get passed. My opponent has allied himself over 90% of the time with that group. So while talking as a moderate, working across the aisle person is an excellent start, I'd like to see many, many more votes that actually reflect the moderate middle. I am in this race specifically because of this. Thank you.
Thank you. And your next question is, if elected, would you support legislation to encourage delisting the spotted owl from endangered status to help create the much-needed jobs in the North State? Is
Okay.
delisting a word? I don't know.
It is. In fact, it is. In Congress, I would absolutely support taking a look at the Endangered Species Act and rethinking how it was done. It was created many years ago. It has an excellent intent and purpose, but it's been very difficult to carry out well, and especially up here in the rural area. We've been impacted by it in ways that was not anticipated. It needs to be relooked at. It needs to be rethought. You can continue to protect species while not taking land away from farmers. We can do that, and we can adjust the Endangered Species Act to make that happen. That does not apply to jobs, the job situation, to my mind, in this district. What we need to do for jobs in this district is to help our small businesses by getting broadband up here, by doing tax reform, by helping our small business with the paperwork, by advocating for green energy, by making the outdoors industry the phenomenal thing it could be. That's going to require leadership, and that's something that's been missing up here for too long.
Thank you. Doug?
I think the science would support delisting the owl if you were using real science and not emotion and utter lawsuits and other vehicles to stop that sort of thing from happening. So the delisting of the owl would mean much for our economy, would mean much for the proper management of our forests. The owl actually thrives better in a thinned forest. Its biggest opponent is another owl, the barred owl. It's a predator to it. So are we going to choose between owls here? So what we really need to focus on is having a process where there's not so much lawsuit and so much stopping of the type of forest management we need. Like after we got 250,000 acres that have burned up in Siskiyou County, how easy is it going to be to go in and do the salvage that needs to be done immediately after those fires are put out so we can recover the forest again? On federal land, it's not going to happen. The Forest Service personnel out there told me as much. On private land, they're already started on that. Look at the Endangered Species Act as it affects the valley elderberry beetle. That is thwarting very important flood control projects, yet they proposed themselves, Fish and Wildlife, to delist it in 2005. And here we are doing another study for 2 more years to delist it maybe by 2016.
Thank you. What is your position on emergency drought relief legislation that would obviously benefit the state of California at this point?
I have a position, and I'm also legislating towards that end. Again, Sites Reservoir can be part of a solution to increase water supply for all Californians, no matter what its use. If you increase the water pie, there's less pressure on the previous size of that pie for that water to be taken by somebody else that has more attorneys or more voting power than us in Northern California. That's why I'm an advocate for all types of new water. Building sites, building desal, increasing the efficiencies of water we already have. So the thrust really needs to be continuing to battle in Congress for that. Me and my colleagues on the House side have been working a lot that way. Senator Feinstein has worked that way as well in the Senate. So we need to come together and get it done. We still have time left this year. I'm hoping to get our legislation moved to have immediate measures taken for California drought relief. But one piece of legislation is not going to do it this year or whether it happens in 2015. It's going to need to be an ongoing process because we have to fight through environmental restrictions, time in, time out, that try and thwart this.
Thank you.
Any emergency drought relief legislation that comes out of the federal government or the state government is going to have to acknowledge the fact that you can't simply create more water. That's an interesting concept, really, if you think about it. We already have allocated in this state 5 times more water than we normally receive. It's already been acknowledged that this drought year we have this year is not going to be the last one. There is already a big fight brewing over the existing water that we have. I do think we're going to need to have some regional appropriate storage facilities. They need to be here in our district and benefiting our constituents. We also need to be making sure that our groundwater is properly allocated, that not one group can suck all of it out, depriving their neighbors of water. And we are going to have to ask the Central Valley and Southern California to look at their own regional solutions. 60% of the state's water comes from the North State. 1% of the bond funds come back here to help us protect our watersheds. The new bond will decrease that to even less. There has been no leadership in this district to make sure we are protecting our water first. I will change that.
Thank you. You can keep that microphone. Do you believe that, this is almost a follow-up question, do you believe that money should be spent to raise Shasta Dam to provide more storage for water? Why or why not?
So that's a question that has a whole bunch of things to look at. The question about raising Shasta Dam, the first thing to look at again is, will that create more water? It will not. Shasta Dam has not been full. It's filled 1 out of 5 years. We're not going to get more water out of that. The costs have not been allocated. It's all good and well for a lot of folks to say, let's raise more dams and not talk about where that money's going to come from. It would come from you and me. There are a number of businesses behind the dam who would be flooded out, who are already suffering greatly because of the uncertainty of whether this would happen or not. There is a tribe whose lands would be completely inundated if we raise that dam. Now, and there are environmental issues that I think can be mitigated. Honestly, some of those things can be mitigated. I would have to be convinced that we're going to have more water that would go to this district, which that water would not do, and that we could mitigate all these other issues, and that it made fiscal sense to do so before I could vote for that. At this point, I'm not convinced.
Thank you. Doug? It goes like this. Do you believe that money should be spent to raise Shasta Dam to provide more storage for water? Why or why not?
I think after we've had a good comprehensive review of all the different aspects of that, we make the decision then. There are implications for the infrastructure going through there. There's implications for the landowners. Will the people that operate resorts and marinas and that recreation infrastructure be made whole? Will they be allowed to have the new property they would need to continue to operate? There's a lot of things that just don't meet the eye to a simple raise. I would be for a raise possibly if it actually produced more water. I think something we need to look at though is how do we operate the dam we have already in a fashion that allows it to retain more water? So what can we do that allows the current infrastructure, instead of releasing so much for flood control or other purposes too far ahead of time, then the lake doesn't fill the latter part of the spring? Can we be looking a little more dynamically at how we can keep the lake fuller sooner, longer, and maybe retain more of that water that we already would have once we get caught up from the drought? So we do have to have more rainfall as part of that equation. So that's why all the different aspects of water supply are important.
And that lake is looking pretty empty. I was out there the other day. Would you all agree? It's looking pretty darn empty. So the next question, Doug, for you, what is your position on marijuana?
I oppose the legalization of marijuana. I think they're on the cusp of disaster in Washington and Colorado. And amazingly, the state of California opposed that same question just a couple elections ago here. I think it was Prop 19, if I remember correctly. And I thought, wow, that's amazing, California. Okay, so I don't think it's a solution. If we're talking about medicinal use, which is what the excuse was for Prop 215 and many others, then let's make it a formal process where you would have an actual true prescription for a true drug that is controlled and is made like any other. But it isn't going to be people smoking something that they grow in their backyard. So I'm against the legalization. I think it's really causing a lot of damage to neighborhoods where you have one person growing next door to another, and it's just not a good neighbor way to do it. So let's get this right.
Thank you. Heidi?
I want to circle back very briefly to the raising of the Shasta Dam. Some of my opponent supporters and, in fact, endorsers are under the impression that he does support raising the dam, so let's be clear about what we do and do not believe. Regarding marijuana, states, medical marijuana is legal in a number of states now, and I think it would be very helpful if the federal government came in, followed the state's lead, and helped to regulate it properly. It's clear that it has incredibly beneficial effects, but it is not regulated very well, and we need to do a better job of that. When it comes to recreational marijuana, what we're seeing right now throughout the North State are huge grows in our national forests that pollute the water, release toxic substances. There's a gun culture around it that's threatening our society, and we're going to need to do some regulation at some point, and we can also bring in tax revenues for that. I don't think we're ready for that. I would love to see how Washington and Colorado does. I think actually they're finding some great results and they're learning some good lessons, and we could learn from them as well.
Thank you. The next question for you is, do you support a second round of cuts to the Center for Disease Control? Why or why not?
That's almost a giveaway question. So we've got this terrible disease right now that we're dealing with, Ebola, and we know that we need to be doing more in Africa to combat it. That's what the science and the health experts are saying right now. We need to be there on the ground helping to keep it from spreading. We can't be, and then we need to also be in here making sure that we're not bringing that disease here. The CDC was cut by $600 million in the last House of Representatives by the GOP-led Congress, which cut besides that many, many other things. Not only that, the Congress, both the House and the Senate, have held up the appointment of a Surgeon General for almost a year now, who would be in charge of leading our response to this disease. This is where Congress has a great deal of power and a great deal of responsibility. They needed to step up originally to stop defunding every agency they don't like, go in and fix what needs to be fixed, and continue to fund things like the CDC that are essential to our health and welfare in this country.
Thank you. Doug?
Look, the question for CDC or any other federal agency, is it on task? Is it on mission? Is it following that mission? Is it spending the people's tax dollars properly and efficiently on that mission? And so when Congress, with its job of oversight in committee, in appropriations, or through the budget process, sees good results, then we fund it, or we should, and we should not fund things that are not efficient and not getting down that path. Generically, I would say, is it a good thing to be cutting it anymore? Probably not with what we deal with Ebola, but is it on task? Is it on a mission to actually suppress that and be effective in doing so? With our porous southern border, are we taking the steps to make sure that the disease is being brought in by uninvited illegal immigrants? What are they causing? So what is the CDC's proper role going to be in that? If they're willing to fulfill that mission, then we should fund them.
Thank you. And your next question is, what do you believe the United States government should be doing to diminish the power and actions of the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, also known as ISIS? And do you think that Congress should reconvene as soon as possible to debate that issue? Why or why not?
Right now, we're in a 90-day period under the president's powers to attack ISIL, and doing so with American airstrikes in coordination with other nations and their airstrikes. And before we left for recess, Congress put forward legislation to support, with provisions, with benchmarks that will come due in mid-December, the idea of getting the people in the Arab world to support also measures to stop and crush ISIL. So working in concert with people that we maybe don't normally get along with so well, but it's an opportunity here to reach out and build a coalition. So that's what's happening in the next 90 days, is building that. United Arab Emirates and the Saudis, they're going to fund most of the effort. So it's going to be our airstrikes, and we want to put their troops on the ground to fight in their own backyard, because I think most of the Arab world realizes this is a direct threat to most of them and their worldview, so along with our ally Israel.
Thank you. Heidi?
Just briefly, there's not a shred of evidence that Ebola is coming across our southern border, and we don't want to be doing fear-mongering that's taking us away from the actual threats. When it comes to ISIL and ISIS, Congress, before they left for summer, gave a very discreet, distinct, small approval for the president to conduct airstrikes overseas. And I am pleased to see that the regional partners are coming on board. It is essential that they are on board. In fact, they need to take over the leadership of this whole effort. However, we already have a casualty, an American casualty over there. And Congress, while it's now on this 7-week paid vacation, is doing nothing to debate this issue. Our president should call Congress back into session. Congress itself, without the president's action, could decide to go back in session. We're spending $1 billion on a Tomahawk, $10,000 per hour per aircraft. We're spending billions of dollars already on this. It's likely we're going to end up sending our children over there, people like my son and my dad who are veterans. Congress must debate this. They must have a robust debate about this. They are shirking their duty if they do not.
Thank you. Stay there. In your opinion, what should the U.S. Forest Service do to minimize the devastation caused by wildfires in our national forests?
That is one of the key issues on my platform, that the federal government, who is in charge of many of the forests that we have up in this area, has unfortunately mismanaged for a number of years the undergrowth. So we did not allow fires to go through, then we did, then we didn't, and now we have this incredible undergrowth that helps create what are called these mega fires that are very difficult to contain, that hurt our economy, that directly threaten our first responders. We can do a great deal to fix that. We can create public-private partnerships to get in there and clear that out. We can help support the biomass industry. We can create jobs. All that needs to happen is Congress has to pass a bill and work with the Forest Service to make sure it happens. Once again, this has been an issue up here for 30 years. There hasn't been a single bill until a couple weeks ago passed to deal with this. I'd also like to commend the city of Weed in the Bowles Fire, who worked with Mount Shasta City, worked with CAL FIRE, worked with the federal agencies. They did a phenomenal job to make sure that that fire didn't go any farther, and we could do so much more like that if we make sure that our first responders are fully trained and supported.
Thank you. Doug?
Well, you kind of know there's a problem there when you have to pass a bill to have them be called wildland firefighters instead of forest technicians. All right? So we're looking at a situation where the Forest Service has not managed the land properly. Instead, they jump to the dance tune of a handful of environmental organizations that shut them down upon the threat of lawsuit. They need to fight back on the lawsuits and get the job done instead of just dancing to their tune. When we have Bureau of Land Management, for example, has found $799,000 for gift cards and gift certificates for people, we're looking at our land management agencies. It's not really focusing on the job they should be doing with our public lands. When they declare wilderness areas or national monuments like they want to do in this area, that means hands off, people out. No timber, no jobs, no management, no ability to have roads that can get there to help firefighters. And now they're contemplating yet another rule to decide whether they can have snowmobiles go in the winter. So they're busy working on that stuff instead of doing the job they should be doing in Siskiyou County, Shasta, and down by Yellowstone or Yosemite.
Thank you. This next question is for you. It has been well established that we currently have a do-nothing Congress. Latest Gallup polling has Congress at public approval ratings of about 15%. To change this, are you willing as a congressperson to take steps to develop a workable Congress, and what might those steps be?
Congress is both houses, right? It's the House and the Senate. Everybody thinks the Congress is the House. You know, my title to some is Congressman. Now, what we're looking at is that we need to have responsiveness to what we need for jobs, for our forestry. So that's what I will be working on, is the things that matter to us in the district. Reach across the aisle, work with both sides of the aisle, work with both houses to get things done. I'm just as frustrated by it as you all, because I've offered legislation on forestry, I've offered amendments to other bills that sometimes they get through the House, most of the times they do, but they stop in the Senate. Now, what is that? What kind of process is that where Harry Reid has 387 bills sitting on his desk, passed bipartisan Democrat bills, Republican bills, that he won't even take up and do in order to bring jobs, energy, reform to the federal government, the types of things that we really should be doing. So I'm as frustrated as you by it because I want to get the job done.
Thank you. Heidi?
I feel the need to make a correction again. The fact is that there are about 3 dozen bills sitting on the desk in the Senate to be passed and about 3 dozen bills sitting in the desk in the House to be passed. So they're both at fault. And there is, in fact, 0 job bills waiting in the Senate to be passed because the House of Representatives has not moved on any jobs bills. Now, there is a group of congressmen in the House called the No Labels Group. There are congressmen and congresswomen I respect, Democrats and Republicans, who, again, are part of that moderate, modest majority who want to get things done. I will work with that group. I'm watching what they're doing. They have excellent goals. They're getting some things done. But they reject the extremist types of votes that you're seeing coming from the far right, which our congressman has allied with. $24 billion wasted on a government shutdown. I will not vote for that. $310 billion wasted on a corporate giveaway. I will not vote for that. It's fiscally irresponsible, and you will not see a majority of people voting for those things.
Thank you. Stay right there. Do you believe the government has the right to collect or use Americans' information without a warrant?
No, I don't. And I think the government has engaged in extreme overreach on this issue. And I blame the administrations of both parties on this. This is, again, this is a nonpartisan issue. Our civil rights need to be protected. Of course, we need to be protected with our national security agencies. They do need to be able to get private information to protect us from serious threats. But that's why we have the system which requires them to get warrants. And that system should be respected. And I believe we could find a lot of agreement on that. And why that hasn't been changed yet, I don't know.
Thank you. Doug?
How many of you get a notice in the mail from your bank or maybe your insurance every time they want to change something? They send you something that do you agree with the policy on privacy? You get a lot of that mail, probably, don't you? So now, wouldn't it be something if NSA and IRS and all those folks sent you one of those too, saying, "Hey, do you mind if we do some snooping around, listening to your phone calls or looking at your bank records or what you buy, where you go?" That'd be pretty amazing, wouldn't it? So we absolutely should have a warrant, some type of justification for why they're looking at anybody's information. And that would usually be involved if there's been a crime committed and there's been a due process and a good reason to believe that this is justifiable for looking into somebody's information or their background. Other than that, it's a gigantic invasion of privacy. It goes against the founding principles of liberty and what America is all about. So it's very necessary to have that type of protection for our privacy.
Thank you. Hold on to that microphone. The Wilderness Act is now 50 years old this year. Should we continue to designate suitable federal lands, more lands to develop more wilderness?
The fast answer is I disagree with developing more wilderness areas like that, but I have helped sponsor and support legislation in the Natural Resources Committee to have Congress have a say in it. Under the Antiquities Act, the president has a sweeping power to just designate. Over 1 million acres declared in Utah that's now off limits, along the New Mexico border that the illegal immigrants coming across that border know that, well, Border Patrol can't go through anymore because they're limited. They can't even go on those lands, so they know that this is the pipeline for them to come through. So it really doesn't stop anything other than what we need to do to manage and access our federal lands. If people are concerned about development, there's a process to develop anything that's not easy too, when you get through all the lawsuits and get the permits. So really, there's not the need to have these declarations, but the legislation response is if we do find one, if there's a good need for a limited area, then it needs to consult Congress, your representatives, by a vote too, instead of just a stroke of the pen by the president.
Thank you. Heidi?
Thanks. The conservation of wild lands and natural parks is one of the great legacies of this country, and it was actually started, a great deal was done by the Republican Party to do this, and I have great respect for what they've done. We do need to continue to protect our most vulnerable lands, and I do agree also that Congress should have a say in that. That should be, again, a robust debate between the branches about which lands should be designated wilderness and how that should be managed. Of course, Congress would have to take an action and vote, and we've seen a lot of executive orders that I don't think are a great way to legislate, but out of sheer necessity because of Congress's unwillingness to act on a number of issues. So that would be my concern there. I also believe in conjunctive use, that we can protect our wildlands while allowing limited commercial activity and great public access. There is a way to do this that's balanced, and I look forward to making sure we do that better in the future.
Thank you. Next question. Do you believe that the right to marry the person of one's choice is a civil rights issue? Why or why not?
Yes, of course it is. You know, when the government decides to get involved in an issue like marriage, create an institution of civil marriage, it also has the responsibility to make sure that it is equally applied. Justice, liberty, and equality for all. What two consenting adults agree to do is their own business, and why the government should be involved in saying some adults can do that and others cannot, I'm not quite sure why we would do that. Our government should be involved in protecting the civil rights of all of us, and that includes LGBTQ folks who would like to get married.
Doug?
I believe God created marriage to be between one man and one woman. The voters of California have affirmed that twice, and this area of Northern California has affirmed that overwhelmingly. That's what I believe.
Thank you. Next question, and actually we're going to give them 2 minutes for this question because I think it's longer than it might appear. Scared you, didn't I? How would you like to see our foreign policy changed? What parts are good? What parts would you change?
Foreign policy. Well, our policy on foreign relations should always be America first. What is best for America, its interests around the world? Because America's interests usually are ones that are beneficial towards freedom, type of representative open government that we stand for around the whole world. Who's the first one there when there's a crisis? It's the United States helping out other countries in their time of need. So our foreign policy should reward people that are friendly towards us and maybe not be so rewarding with our limited funds to people that don't like us. And I think they would start to toe the line and be more friendly with the United States if they knew that that was going to be our policy going forward. Whether we're talking trade, whether we're talking hopefully not very needed military actions, but it's really a thing where if we're defending our values and exporting them to other countries, the whole world is better off. So I'm of a mind that right now with what's going on in the Middle East, it's really a difficult quagmire for us to try and sort out things that go back hundreds or even thousands of years that we intervening in that would be difficult to fix. That said, I think we're all taking the right actions. Congress was working with the White House on ISIL and demonstrating over this next 90 days how well that can work, and then making another decision in December on how we extend that. But indeed, we have to not endanger our own people, but bring in the whole coalition that is trying to be formed there in order to have that self-interest of protecting themselves with America's aid. So I think that's the right direction. Foreign policy is not easy, but if we export our values and stand for America first, I think we're going to export the right type of mentality to the rest of the world.
Thank you. Heidi?
Thank you for that and for the extra time. I just want to note that I have there wasn't enough time to say everything in the opening, that I do have bachelor's and master's degrees in international relations from Pomona College and Columbia University, as well as a bachelor's in public policy from Rutgers University. I've studied that because I'm fascinated with how the world works and what our place is in it. It's undeniable that today the world is incredibly interconnected. And the reality is that our economic interconnections, our cultural interconnections, and our political interconnections mean that we have to find a way to talk and work with all the other countries, whether we like them or not, whether we agree with their policies or not, whether they have the exact same political system that we have or not. It is not our job to export our beliefs to another country. I believe in our system. I believe it is one of the best systems in the world. What we can do is model how it works well and encourage others to follow that and support our allies who help us do that. But when it comes to we are military intervention, we are overextended. We are in dozens of hundreds of countries already with an unclear idea of what it is exactly we need or want to be achieving. We must do a much better job at the executive level, and Congress must become much more informed about this to come up with a policy that looks at where and why we get involved. Commercial interests seem to be driving much of our involvement right now. Overseas oil and overseas commercial interests, that's not exactly the highest moral reason to get militarily involved in other countries. I would like us to have a much more robust debate and to provide more leadership in a humane way and be very careful about how we intervene in other countries. And again, the interconnectedness of our economy means that we must be able to conduct diplomacy with all countries.
Thank you. The next question. 1 minute. We're back to 1 minute. I'm a quick one. That's the only way we can get a lot of questions through here. The Older Americans Act needs to be passed before December 2014. The Older Americans Act funds Meals on Wheels, transportation programs, and other senior services. Do you support this piece of legislation, yes or no, and why?
Well, if we can't support our elderly who might need a little extra help, who can we support in this country? We have a great deal of elderly folks here who are living at or below the poverty line. We have a lot of veterans who are falling into that category as well. I absolutely believe that we need a bare minimum safety net for those folks who need it. We're still one of the richest countries in the world. It's also economically makes much more sense that we make sure people can be fed and housed and do not end up on the streets or in emergency rooms. That is a fundamental part of America. And I would certainly encourage that we continue that program and, as always, improve it.
Thank you. Doug?
It's a key safety net, but as all safety nets, as all government programs, they need to be operated in a way that's efficient and meeting the mission. So when we look at these, are they meeting the requirements that we, as Congress, when the program is created, that we ask of it? And so if it's adhering to that, then we keep funding it. If it's not, then we need to have oversight committee hearings and process, change the law, that whatever may be wrong with it as it's evolved over time that isn't working correctly. So I think these, in concert with a well-working Social Security system and other aspects of aid for people, a food stamp system that is working correctly, you know, we should make sure that, because we also have taxpayers and the next generations that are going to have these programs to deal with on their earnings as well. So as we see this, how it affects veterans, I mean, the VA and the other forms of aid that they would see, those aren't being delivered to them. We have way more homeless veterans than we'd ever should have because they can't get their benefits heard or have their claims processed, and that's a crime.
Thank you. The next question, what can you do to, as a congressperson or as a Congress, what can you do to relieve students of their high level of debt when they leave college? Increase Pell Grants, other thoughts?
Pell Grants have been in place for quite a while. Congress continues to fund those. But what doesn't get talked about with any government support is that how do we bring down the cost of doing business? The cost of tuition keep going up. Are the universities focused on their mission of educating kids, educating students, or are they off doing other things? What is the cost of doing business for any of that? I think if you refocus that, get down to things that fall along the lines of the 3 R's, only at the university level, turning out people that are taking part in the majors, that are going to produce jobs, the high tech, all the things that are going to make America first, instead of losing out to foreign interests, then that's where it goes. So I don't think we need to continue to try to fund something that costs too much. Let's reduce the cost of doing the business of kids getting through college and get those tuition prices down. There's ways to do that if you change the focus back to the basic things that college should be providing and not a lot of other superfluous things that drive the cost up.
Heidi?
I was fortunate to be a recipient of a federal student loan when I graduated from high school. It's actually the only federal government assistance I've ever had to take, and I paid it all back, every last dime. And I was able to use that to get an excellent education, to become a better citizen and a better mother, and I was able to pay that all back within 10 years. That's because those federal loans were at a reasonable rate. That was a win-win for everyone, including the government. They made money off of it. Right now, we have student loans that are being offered at 12% and above. We have $1.2 trillion of debt in this country for student loans only. Those students cannot buy cars. They cannot buy homes. They have zero credit, and they are going to be impacting our economy very soon because we cannot grow as long as they cannot invest. We are offering loans to commercial banks at the rate of 1%. 1%. And we are making money off of our students. Investment in good education is the cornerstone of a good democracy. We need to reduce that student loan rates of the federal government loans and make it possible for all our students who want to get an excellent education.
Thank you. Next question. Given the average age of farmers now is about 60 years of age, what policies could you promote to help beginning farmers?
Some of I live in Nevada County in Grass Valley, and we have a robust organic farming community there, a great food to farm to fork movement, a lot of young people who are getting into farming for the first time. and they're finding a number of obstacles. One of them is onerous regulations on organic farmers, which do not exist for the very large commercial farmers who have the clout in Congress to remove those regulations. We need to do much more to support them that way. This is also an area where I think the Farm Bill could be helpful. Rather than continuing to support at 115% price levels our millionaire farmers, let's make really low interest loans available to young farmers so they can get started. This is a critical piece of our economy up here. And I would support us taking action in Congress to do more to help them.
Thank you. Doug?
For anybody getting into farming new, it's a real challenge because of the high cost of overhead, of getting in. But what really discourages kids from coming back home to the farm is that they don't see a lot of hope in it a lot of times. And it is a regulatory load on that affects all types of farmers. I don't know how it affects just organic, because we certainly see our load on all types of production agriculture, where people trying to get grazing permits, find places to graze for cattle folks. The load of regulation that goes upon all segments of agriculture is a big cost and a huge discouragement for kids to come back home, because they see their parents struggling with it, pulling their hair out, doing paperwork, fighting against people that don't understand what they do nor seem to care about how agriculture is actually sustained. So you would have to find relief for people to think that they can actually be in business a couple more generations than that. I hope my kids have that opportunity someday, because it doesn't always look very hopeful with that regulatory load, and instead thinking we're going to import food.
Thank you. Hang in there. This is my favorite question so far. How do we get more people in this country to vote?
It's really discouraging when you see how people are turned off by their government process, and the cynicism turns out in lower voting rolls. And so when you're out there knocking doors, talking to people, and they say, I'm not going to bother to vote because my vote doesn't count. A court's going to throw out how I voted on a proposition. Or they run for something and then they go do something else. And I've been pretty consistent in trying to stick with what I say I will do as a candidate. I think all candidates should do that. But also I think we have a higher level of decorum as a public leader that you're supposed to represent in front of the people. And so those are the things I try to model in what I do. Yeah, not everybody's going to agree with me. That's for certain. But at least in the way you conduct yourself, and have all elected officials do that. No scandals, none of that stuff. Be a model that people want to look up to, and maybe inspire the next generations to run and be part of it instead of turning them off.
Thank you. Heidi?
Yeah, this is a great concern to me as well. We have really low voting levels in this country, even though we've had great freedoms to vote for quite a while now. When I talk to my own kids, and I've been to high school assemblies, and I've talked to a number of young people, most of them are either not voting or saying they want to be declined to state. And what they are turned off of, for the most part, is the partisan bickering that goes on in both parties. And it has never been more obvious than in this Congress. We have the least productive Congress in the history of the United States. And the poison pills that have continued to be thrown out, and the sheer politicking of shut down the government politics, turns them off. That stuff needs to stop. We also need to change the Citizens United ruling. The influx of money in politics has made so many congressmen and senators simply bought off by multinational corporations and big businesses that many people feel that their voice is no longer being heard. And they're right. It's starting to get weakened. Thank you.
Thank you. So stay there. You can still hold the microphone. There we go. Could you address the issues of immigration?
Yes.
Would you like 2 minutes for that?
I'd be happy to go over 1 minute on that one.
So why don't we give them 2 minutes?
So immigration is, again, it's the classic case of a problem that's been around for a very long time. that has some very basic solutions, that has support across the country and on both sides of the aisle in Congress, and cannot get passed because of this obstructionist politics that we continue to see in the last 2 years. The system is broken. Whether you think we need more border security or less, the system is broken. What we need to do is start passing some bills to fix it. The first thing we must do is create a process by which people can actually come into the country, pass a test, and get processed. It takes 10 years, up to 10 years or more, from people from coming through our southern border to get any action taken at all. No wonder they're coming across the border anyway. They are looking for economic opportunity, and some of us are also encouraging to come across because it's cheap labor. We must establish a process that is reasonable for folks like that. We need to have an employer check program so we're not simply continuing to go after illegal immigrants and not holding employers accountable. And I would love to see another guest worker program involved so that we can both benefit from our immigrants and make sure that they are obeying the law as well. There are two sides to this issue. We gain a lot from our immigrants, and we're paying a lot for our immigrants. We must pass a law and start to fix the system so that both countries can benefit from this need for labor that continues to cross the border.
Thank you. Doug?
Immigration reform. That would start with enforcing the laws that we have already. There's a reason why it's called illegal immigration. It's because illegal is breaking a law on immigration policy. So we can't have any kind of reform until it starts with enforcing the borders we have. Now, does that mean closing the borders? That's a misnomer. It means having a border that we control on our side in the United States with a tall fence, a wide gate, well-oiled hinges on that gate, and people staffing the gate that are declaring who's going to come in and who's going out. We can set these priorities, we can set these numbers as a nation for what fits the United States. We want legal immigration. We want people to apply for citizenship. We want people to apply for work permits. We want people to have visas to come visit, be part of the student visas. All those things, we're for those. But it needs to be a legal process. So what you see is the roadblock in Congress is that the left wants to have amnesty for approximately 11 million people that are already here. They want to create new voters that haven't gone through our process, that haven't been educated on what the United States is about. Back in the day, you had to pass tests to do that. Now the only test is whether you can make it across and get into a line somewhere to get the government benefits. So it really comes down to enforcing the laws properly, like so much. The Department of Justice, our government has been falling down in a lot of ways on enforcing laws across the board. This is one key area. There's areas we could tweak this probably. I would love to have a guest worker program. You can call it what you want. The Bracero program, documented workers. It's better for the workers. It's better for the immigrants. If we're giving them a document after they've been vetted, we know who they are, and they have a time frame that they can work within. They don't have to sneak across. They don't have to pay these horrible coyotes, unspeakable things that happen to the women that come across the border. It's horrendous. How is this a policy? It's good for everybody. Let's have legal work permits and do this in a way that is honorable instead of ignoring it because of politics.
Thank you. Hang on to that mic. What will you do to help unrecognized tribes in Northern California gain that crucial recognition?
For tribal recognition, there needs to be, and there is, a process of documenting their history. And that goes through the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and it's a very long one. It takes too long in many cases to get that done. But it needs to respect what is already there in the balance with the other tribes that have that recognition. So a lot of things have been done to Native Americans over the history of this country that are wrong. So we need to set that course correctly. So the process for recognition doesn't need to be done by just by fiat by Congress. There needs to be a very good demonstrated process of the history of the tribe in that region and the consultation with the other tribes in making sure that that history is correct for that recognition. And so that's where the hard part really comes in, because the BIA doesn't move very quickly, and sometimes the records aren't very accessible as well for what it really is. And so I'm in favor of trying to find solutions to that so we can have the proper recognition and have it be done in a fashion that's a little more timely, but with due process.
Thank you. Heidi?
Thank you. I worked for a number of years with tribes in California and 3 other states to help them set up waste management and recycling programs. And so I've had relationships with 100 or more tribes and rancherias. The process for them dealing with the federal government is incredibly cumbersome, and they have not been fairly treated for a very long time. This is a case of, again, of an organization or a federal agency that needs some help, and needs some restructuring, and needs some improvement. It's fascinating to me to stand here and hear my own congressman talk about how all the improvements need to be made while he's in Congress, and that is their job to improve these agencies rather than cut the EPA completely off or shut down the IRS or talk about how all these other agencies need to work better. Let's pass some bills and fix them.
Is that working? No, yeah. What would you do to make sure that our veterans get the health care they need in a timely manner, and not just health care, but other services too?
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, again, I've talked about this before. We have a high number of veterans up here in the North State, and I have family members myself who are veterans, and so I'm familiar with some of the issues that they've had to deal with. The biggest issue we have right now is not enough clinics in this area, and not enough resources going to mental health services, not good enough coordination among the agencies, and we can do much better for all of those ways. My opponent voted to not extend the clinics, and the Ryan budget cuts veteran services. So I know we can't just keep spending and spending and spending in the federal government, but our veterans are a special class of people. They've put their lives on the line, and they deserve to get everything they need when they come back to this country. I have on my website, I've already committed 2 years ago that I will have a full-time staff working on veterans issues. I will help to institute training programs to help them get jobs, incentives for employers to hire them. That's the best thing we can do to get them back into the mainstream economy.
Thank you. Doug?
Thank you. This is one of the biggest scars we have on what federal government operations are. My office, my staff, myself, we've worked very hard on advancing positive change for the Veterans Administration System on the delivery of health care, but also having the veterans who haven't had their benefits determined yet heard. We've worked with or against this Oakland office, which is the regional one for Northern California, to cause them to go in a direction that will actually, we've had cases that have languished for 36 years. Now, a poor veteran waiting that long has to have the patience of Job to get through that. And what does this mean for veterans that have given up homelessness or even a much higher rate of suicide than average in society? That's a horrendous way to be treating them. I took part in a Veterans Administration or Veterans Committee in the House to ask those tough questions of the VA, and we also had whistleblowers in there. We have whistleblowers we work with in Oakland. We're getting results, we're turning the corner on this thing, but it's still not nearly what it needs to be because we have a long ways to go. Our veterans shouldn't feel like they've been abandoned or hopeless, especially if we ever want more veterans to serve our nation in foreign wars.
Thank you. It's your turn again, Doug. You'll like this one. What do you see as the biggest issue related to climate change?
Biggest issue related to climate change is false information. We had NOAA, National Oceanic NOAA, play with the numbers on what the temperatures have been since the 30s in this country to skew. They actually said so it would fit their model of what temperatures should be. When the temperatures have stabilized for the last 20 years, we're not seeing global warming has been hyped by Hollywood and everybody else. No. What do we do in this country? We develop technology that makes things better. If we allow that innovation instead of crushing the energy business, crushing people's regulations that make them do not what they do best, we're going to innovate better automotive technology, better power plant technology that will make things better anyway. But when we crush that with cap and trade and the EPA completely on the loose against coal, against everything else that is part of our current economy that is always working to improve, then we take any hope away of having the economy be in this country, instead exporting it into China, where they don't care anything about trying to get better environmentally.
Thank you. Heidi?
The effects of climate change is one of the most critical national security risks we have in this country. And that is not me, coming from me, that is coming from our Department of Defense. 97% of the world's scientists who are experts at this agree that climate change exists and is human-caused. Numerous agencies and businesses, including the insurance and reinsurance agencies, and if they don't understand risk, nobody does, is preparing for the effects of climate change. So is the DoD, so are a number of other agencies. Scientists at Stanford University just came out with another study. They were looking at the effects that climate change might have on our existing drought. The effects of what's going on in the atmosphere that affect our drought are going to be tripled with climate change. Continuing to stick our head in the sand and deny that it exists based on absolutely no information that is credible is simply going to delay the ability for us to solve this critical issue that will impact our children and our grandchildren far more than it's impacting us today.
Thank you. This is a slight change of pace here. Would you author or co-sponsor legislation to restructure the 2006 Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act, the PAEA?
Since I don't know what's in it, I can't say that I would sponsor or co-sponsor legislation about it. What I can say is that I support our postal facilities. I do not think we should be privatizing them. I do not think we should be cutting back on their hours. There's already an issue up here, I know, with one of our facilities needing to be shut down, and all our mail would go to Sacramento and then have to come back here. Postal work is one of the fundamental jobs of the federal government, and I would support anything that keeps that alive and well.
Thank you. Doug?
The issues around that act are primarily on the retirement system in that, and I've seen some numbers on that they don't look like they really jibe with what kind of reality there should be there. And so the postal workers should have a similar treatment as many other type of federal employees in that regard as well. So I think that needs to be looked at and find some ways working with them, including the goals of what was the goal of the act to begin with, and what's it trying to meet, but what's also going to be best for the workers who had promises made to them. And that said, Postal Service in general, I think it's a terrible idea to close the processing center here in Redding, because all the mail having to be trucked to West Sacramento, I mean, what's that do for the green portion of that? More trucks having to go down there? But that said, it's going to only slow the delivery of mail. I oppose the one in Marysville closing on that, because now Sacramento is so impacted by all of Northern California's mail that it's taking extra days to get delivery, and that doesn't really save money when it's costing you in the inconvenience and the less certainty of your mail being delivered. So we need to look at all these areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Hold on to that microphone. What regulations would you support to label or control unhealthy food in our country?
We have a vast infrastructure at the state and the federal level with USDA and State Department of Health and our state agriculture department as well. And so it's a deal where it needs to be just continually monitoring the process and making sure it's working. Sweeping regulations because of one occurrence doesn't really improve much for anybody, because the vast majority of it just means more hoops that makes your food more expensive. So I think it's just constant refinements to the system as things come up. When a problem occurs on leafy green vegetables, you address it. It turns out there was something that would have been fairly simple, a simple protocol on how fertilizers and natural fertilizers are used in those areas. It doesn't take sweeping federal regulations to do so. When we already have a system that works pretty well, just keep tweaking on that when you find something that pops up that is new, something unanticipated, and we can work through this. Because your cost of food is not going lower, that's for sure.
Thank you. Heidi?
Unfortunately, we have a relatively unhealthy food system and food regulation system in this country. We've got an entire continent saying they want no GMO foods, which means we can't export our food there. And we now have countries saying they don't want our chicken because we wash it with ammonia. And they have a better, healthier way to deal with it. We're going to need regulations, and we probably need to tighten them up to make sure our food is healthy. When it comes to GMO foods, a technology that is relatively untested, potentially has some benefits, certainly has some risks, we should at least be labeling our food so that we know we can choose ourselves whether to buy that or not. And we should be looking at how this is working for us in terms of other countries rejecting our own food.
Thank you. The next question, Reading, we're talking about Reading in particular here. Reading has seen a large rise in homelessness. Its HUD Section 8 program is frozen to new applicants, and funding has been cut. Do you support more federal housing? What would that look like? Does it need more money?
This is a topic that I've gotten more and more interested in as I've toured around this district for the last 2 years. I can tell you that Reading, Nevada City and Grass Valley, Chico, Mount Shasta, and Oroville, at the very least, are all dealing with the exact same issues with homelessness. It's about law enforcement. Do you prevent people from sitting on sidewalks? Do you set aside a place for them to go? It's about housing. Do you temporarily house them? Do you find permanent housing for them? It's about services. Do we have enough mental health services? Do we have enough services to help people get back on their feet? And we're seeing fire threat from homeless camps in creek beds and in forests. It's a huge issue that I've recognized now as being entirely across this whole district. And I would love to get in there and sit down with all those incredible people in nonprofits and government agencies and law enforcement agencies who are trying to deal with this and come up with a set of solutions, model ordinances, grant programs, and figure out how we can address this and all of us learn from each other.
Thank you. Doug? That question goes like this. Reading has seen a large rise in homelessness. Its HUD Section 8 program is frozen to new applicants, and funding has been cut. Do you support more federal housing money? How would you solve this problem?
Okay, it really, so much of what would be the fixes to a lot of things is our economy rebounding. And so if there's jobs out there for people, there'd be less homelessness for those that are capable of jobs. There's a place called Work Training Center that's in Chico and partly up here too, I still believe, that helps people that have a level of disability to get integrated in that workforce. That's a great thing. And so what we need is to continue to incentivize folks that want to help people by allowing them to work those jobs on a part-time basis and get back into the swing of things. For those that really cannot be employed, then we need to do a better job of addressing what their individual needs are on mental health. And again, when we come back to seeing how many veterans are part of this population, then if we're doing a much better job of having their cases heard on what benefits they're due after their service instead of put off for years and years, we need to decrease that population dramatically right there. But across the board, we need to do better and find more opportunity for people.
Thank you. Next question for you. Do you believe that the Internal Revenue Service has treated all taxpayers fairly? That is a loaded question.
Boy. Yeah, do we want to just laugh for a while on that one? No, it's not right. And again, the amount of snooping that they do into our lives and the unfairness, when you have a case that the government is always right on that is not true. And I've seen that at the state level, the Franchise Tax Board. You go before that group with a legitimate case and they deny you almost every time. So the IRS now being handed additional responsibility of managing your health care system or enforcing that through the Affordable Care Act, that's a recipe for disaster, not only for your taxation and for your personal privacy, but for your health care as well. We should take it away from that entity and at least move in a direction where Republican ideas, like in the Republican Study Committee, the American Health Care Reform Act goes back to allowing people to keep their plan, to keep their doctor they like, and addresses the people that need the help with inability to have insurance, to pay for insurance. We can address these things if we do it right.
Thank you. Heidi?
Thank you. Once again, we're hearing about problems with federal agencies which not a single bill has been passed to help fix, and I'm frankly kind of tired of that. The IRS does have a lot of problems. It's also been severely underfunded because so many people don't like it. It is also fundamentally the agencies that collects our taxes and turns them around and sends them back out. So without the IRS, we wouldn't have tax collection that allows us to have roads and clean air and clean water and things that benefit all of us. That being said, it needs to be fixed. And again, I want to remind you that my opponent has called for abolishing both the EPA and the IRS. There's a fundamental difference between the two of us, which is that when I find an agency that doesn't work right, I want to fix it, and that's Congress's job. Finding an agency that doesn't work right and abolishing it is a fundamental disagreement with the foundation of the federal government.
Thank you. Next question. What measures would you support to promote and reduce gun violence in our country? So that probably goes to the gun control issue as well.
Yeah, so there are probably two issues to address on that. So overall, I know people are interested in our positions on the Second Amendment rights to own and bear arms, and I support that, the Second Amendment rights. And I also stand with the majority of the American people and Congress, as far as we can tell, in wanting background checks to make sure that felons and folks with severe mental disabilities are less likely to be able to get a hold of weaponry. So beyond that, there's much that we need to do to prevent violence in this country. All of our mental health issues that folks from 30 years ago were dumped on the streets and have never been able to be given the services that they need, we need to be addressing that. Domestic violence is a huge issue. We're seeing it in the news all the time right now. I'm glad it's in the news. It's being talked about. We could do much more to educate people about that. Most of the deaths that occur are in domestic situations, and that's an area that we need great education.
Thank you. Doug?
We have many, many gun laws on the books in California at the federal level already. What happens right now is that when background checks are done for the purchase of another gun or a first gun, whatever it would be, when a red flag goes up on the wrong type of person buying it that has a record, somewhere around 90% or more of those cases are never followed up on by the Department of Justice. They aren't enforcing the laws they already have on the type of gun background check and follow-up that should be happening. So for the free people out there, the best deterrent is people that have concealed carry or open carry to put down crime before it can even happen. And that is shown to be effective time and again in this country when people have that right to defend themselves. I would hate for the idea that for a single woman living alone doesn't have that remedy for somebody that's banging on her apartment door or what have you and threatening that she wouldn't have that tool available if she wants that because of a gun control ordinance, especially in a large city like Chicago or someplace like that.
Thank you. So we're going to have one more question, then we'll have the closing comments, just so that you all will have a feel for how much longer we're going to be here. So this is the last question. Doug, you do this one first. The economy has improved considerably in many parts of the country, but Shasta County continues to struggle. Would you favor funding public works expenditures for much-needed infrastructure locally?
The economy hasn't recovered that well across the country. It's doing great in the Dakotas where they're pulling oil out of there like they haven't before, and other microcosms like that around the country. That said, Northern California is suffering because we don't have access to the resources that we have. Instead, we get to watch them burn because of wilderness areas, because of gated forests, things like that. We can't access the minerals that we would need or produce the wood and paper products, agriculture, grazing, all those things are hurting our economy here dramatically. Infrastructure is very key as well. Now, we need to do much more on improving our highways and the types of things that have the connectivity for people and moving goods and materials and such as like that. We also need to improve our connectivity on the internet side in order to bring more things like telemedicine and these technologies to more of our rural areas where people would like to locate and do more things. It would be tremendous for our healthcare system in rural hospitals and rural areas that suffer and really have a hard time keeping going. So let's do much more on infrastructure, because that's where the economy really is going to rebound from the building of it and what it provides.
Thank you. Heidi?
Thank you. Actually, the economy has come back quite a bit across the country. The unemployment rate we know now has dropped to 6% across the country, which is what Mitt Romney had said would indicate a robust economy. So we're doing pretty well overall. However, in our district, not just Shasta County, all of our counties up here are still suffering quite a bit. We have higher unemployment and higher poverty than most other counties. We must invest in infrastructure. I'm glad to hear my opponent mention the internet, which I haven't heard him mention before. For 2 years, I've been calling for investment in the infrastructure that includes broadband up here. All the tests that are being done are about access. We don't even have infrastructure. When the government invests in public works projects in rural areas like ours, we're creating jobs, we're increasing our infrastructure effectiveness, and we're going to have multiple additional effects in the economy. So I certainly think, especially in rural areas, we should be investing in our infrastructure.
Thank you. So now we're going to have closing statements by the two candidates. We had agreed to 2 minutes. Is 2 minutes still satisfactory for both of you? Okay. Heidi, we're going to start with you. We're starting with Mr. LaMalfa. I can't remember which way we went.
I didn't actually get it right either, so we'll manage. So, well, thank you again for your gathering here tonight as part of all of our civic process here, to ask the questions, and to tell your neighbors to get out to vote. I mean, our veterans have fought for many years for that right, for that privilege. When you see people in the Iraqi world there that come back proudly with that purple thumb after having voted and paying a price for that in many cases, it just shows how good we are off in this country that we have that, and we should take that responsibility. Even if you don't know all the people or measures on the ballot, vote the ones that you know. Ask somebody that you know and trust that has good judgment about the other ones. Form an opinion. We have to be participants. So, and asking for your vote again for a 2-year term in the U.S. House, it really comes down to the basic building blocks of what society needs, what the North State needs. I've talked a lot about water. We're going to continue to force the hand of the federal government on voting for and putting through water legislation for all types of water supply. Above ground storage, desal, and the types of things that help conserve water. That helps all of this people of California, all the people of the western states, all the people of the U.S. Jobs, we have passed many bills out of the House of Representatives that languish in the Senate that are pro-jobs. Government doesn't create jobs. It just needs to stand back and allow the atmosphere to happen, that the job creators will have confidence to invest in the United States with manufacturing, with whatever it is, that they'll be here and not be run out of business by regulations or taxation that makes it impossible to be here. That's how you promote the economy. That's not what's happening with the EPA being unleashed on everybody, on ranchers trying to change their crops and being told to pay a huge fine because they changed their crop. And that plays into the whole liberty issue. That's what my signs say. Water, jobs, liberty. Liberty being the big one I saved for last. The cornerstone of the country is the freedoms that our founders had put in place to express ourselves, to have opportunity, to do what we see fit for our families. And that's what I intend to fight for every moment while I'm in Congress. Thank you for being here tonight. I would appreciate your support.
Thank you. Heidi?
Yes. Thank you also for coming out and staying through this long list of excellent questions. I very much appreciate the opportunity. I am not a politician. This is my first run at any race. I am in this race specifically because in this district we've had such lackluster representation, and because in this last 2 years we've had the worst Congress ever. When I learned that my own congressman was allying himself with the extremists who are actually blocking votes from coming to the floor, I was very upset, and I decided to get into this race. I believe that this country still has the best system in the world. We need to respect the system and make sure that we bring laws to the floor and that our congressional representatives are willing to take votes on them and stand by those votes and explain them to us, rather than run away from them, such as they have with immigration reform or as they're doing right now with our overseas involvement in the Middle East. I'm a working mother. I have 2 children, one in college, one who's a veteran and working very hard in this economy. I've worked for everything I own my entire life. I'm a proud Northern Californian woman. I want to protect these incredible resources we have here. I want to support our working families, our veterans. I want to make it possible for our children to get a great education and a professional job and stay here where they'd like to be close to their families. We don't have that right now. And we've had representation for 30 years that has believed exactly what you heard: stand back and do nothing and the economy will take care of itself. That simply does not work anywhere, especially in rural areas. We must invest in education. We must invest in our infrastructure. We must do a much better job with fiscal responsibility. And all of these things can be done at the congressional level in the House of Representatives, where the budget is decided and passed. I would love to be your congresswoman to stand up for this district, for the beauty of it, for the independence of its people, and say we are proud to be part of California rather than we want to secede from it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would like to thank our 2 candidates here for coming. I'd like to thank the audience for coming. This is available, will be available online to view, also on public access station. And we have one more forum tomorrow night in Anderson for City Council for anyone that's interested. Thank you.